Hi guys, before we start chapter number 8, let's recall what we learned in chapter number 7. So we learned about Buddha. His earlier name was Siddhartha, also known as Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, and he was born about 2500 years ago. So Buddha belonged to a small Gana known as the Sakya Gana, and he was a Kshatriya. He finally decided to find his own path to realization and dedicated for days on end under a peepal tree at Bodh Gaya in Bihar, where he attained enlightenment. After that, he was known as the Buddha or the Wise One. He then went to Sarnath near Varanasi. He spent the rest of his life traveling on foot, going from place to place, teaching people till he passed away at Kushinara. The Buddha taught that life is full of suffering and unhappiness. This is caused because we have cravings and desires which often cannot be fulfilled. Sometimes, even if we get what we want, we are not satisfied and want even more or want other things. The Buddha described this as thirst or tanha. He taught that this constant craving could be removed by following moderation in everything. He also taught people to be kind and to respect the lives of others, including animals. He believed that the results of our actions, called karma, whether good or bad, affect us both in this life and the next. The Buddha taught in the language of the ordinary people, Sanskrit, so that everybody could understand his message. Upanishads. Many of the thinkers felt that there was something permanent in the universe that would last even after death. They described this as the Atma or the individual soul and the Brahma or the universal soul. They believed that ultimately both the Atma and the Brahma were one. Many of these ideas were recorded in the Upanishads. These were part of the later Vedic texts. Upanishad literally means approaching and sitting near, and the texts contain conversations between teacher and students. Often ideas were presented through simple dialogues. So we have got a famous Upanishad, the Chandogya Upanishad. Most Upanishadic thinkers were men, especially Brahmins and Rajas. Occasionally, there is mention of women thinkers such as Gargi. One famous exception was Satyakama Jabala, who was named after his mother, the slave woman Jabali. He had a deep desire to learn about reality, was accepted as a student by a Brahmin teacher named Gautama, and became one of the best known thinkers of the time. Many of the ideas of the Upanishads were later developed by the famous thinker Shankaracharya. Panini, the grammarian. One of the most famous was Panini, who prepared a grammar for Sanskrit. He arranged the vowels and the consonants in a special order and then used these to create formulae like those found in algebra. He used them to write down the rules of the language in short formulae. So let's come to Jainism. The most famous thinker of the Jainas, Vardhaman Mahavira, also spread his message around this time, that is 2500 years ago. He was a Kshatriya prince of the Lakshavis, a group that was part of the Vaji Sangh, about which you read in chapter 6. At the age of 30, he left home and went to live in a forest. He taught a simple doctrine: men and women who wished to know the truth must leave their homes. They must follow very strictly the rules of ahimsa, which means not hurting or killing living beings. All beings, said Mahavira, long to live. To all things, life is there. Ordinary people could understand the teachings of Mahavira and his followers because they used Prakrit. The Prakrit spoken in Magadha was known as Magadhi. Followers of Mahavira, who were known as Jainas, had to lead very simple lives, begging for food. They had to be absolutely honest and were specially asked not to steal. Also, they had to observe celibacy, and men had to give up everything, including their clothes. The word Jaina comes from the term Jina, meaning conqueror. Jainism was supported mainly by traders. Over hundreds of years, Jainism spread to different parts of North India and to Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, and Karnataka. They were written down in the form in which they are presently available at a place called Vallavi in Gujarat about 1500 years ago. The Sangh, both the Mahavira and the Buddha felt that only those who left their homes could gain true knowledge. They arranged for them to stay together in a Sangh, an association of those who left their homes. The rules made for the Buddhist Sangh were written down in a book called the Vinaya Pitaka. From this we know that there were separate branches for men and women. Men and women who joined the Sangh led simple lives. They meditated for most of the time and went to cities and villages to beg for food during fixed hours. That is why they were known as Vikshus, Bhikkhus, the Prakrit word for beggar, and Bhikkhunis for women. Those who joined this Sangh included Brahmins, Kshatriyas, merchants, laborers, barbers, courtesans, and slaves. Monasteries. Jain and Buddhist monks went from place to place throughout the year, teaching people. The only time they stayed in one place was during the rainy season, when it was very difficult to travel. Then their supporters built temporary shelters for them in gardens, or they lived in natural caves in hilly areas. Many supporters of the monks and nuns and they themselves felt the need for more permanent shelters, and so monasteries were built. These were known as viharas. The earliest viharas were made of wood and then of brick. Some were even in caves that were dug out in hills, especially in western India. Very often, the land on which the vihara was built was donated by a rich merchant or a landowner or the king. The local people came with gifts of food, clothing, and medicine for the monks and nuns. In return, they taught the people. The system of ashrams. Around the time when Jainism and Buddhism were becoming popular, Brahmins developed the system of ashram. Here, the word ashram does not mean a place where people live and meditate. It is used instead for a stage of life. Four ashrams were recognized. The first one is Brahmacharya, next is Grihastha, then third one is Vanaprastha, and fourth one is Sannyasa. Brahmin, Kshatriya, and Vaishya men were expected to lead simple lives and study the Vedas during the early years of their life. That is Brahmacharya. Then they had to marry and live as householders, Grihastha. Then they had to live in the forest and meditate, vanaprastha. Finally, they had to give up everything and become sannyasis. The system of ashrama allowed men to spend some part of their lives in meditation. Generally, women were not allowed to study the Vedas and they had to follow the ashrams chosen by their husbands. So, in Iran, a Zoroaster was an Iranian prophet. His teachings are contained in a book called Avesta. The language of Avesta and the practices described in it are very similar to those of the Vedas. The basic teachings of Zoroaster are contained in the maxim good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. Uh, and later, some Zoroastrians migrated from Iran and settled down in the coastal towns of Gujarat and Maharashtra. They were the ancestors of today's Parsis. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 7. So let's start chapter number 8. Now let's start chapter number 8. Ashoka, the emperor who gave up war. Roshan's rupees. Roshan clutched the crisp notes that her grandfather had given her on her birthday. While she badly wanted to buy a new cassette, she also wanted to just see and feel the brand new notes. It was then that she noticed that all of them had a smiling face of Gandhiji printed on the right and a tiny set of lions on the left. What were the lions there for? She wondered. A very big kingdom is equals to an empire. So this statue is the lion capital. The lions that we see on our notes and coins have a long story. They were carved in stone. So they were carved in stone and placed on top of a massive stone pillar at Sarnath, about which you read in chapter 7. Ashoka was one of the greatest rulers known in history, and on his instructions, inscriptions were carved on the pillars as well as on rock surfaces. Before we find out what was written in these inscriptions, let us see why his kingdom was called an empire. The empire that Ashoka ruled was founded by his grandfather. Chandragupta Maurya, more than 2300 years ago. Chandragupta was supported by a wise man named Chanakya or Kautilya. Many of Chanakya's ideas were written down in a book called the Arthasastra. Dynasty. When members of the same family become rulers one after another, the family is often called a dynasty. The Mauryas were a dynasty with 3 different rulers. The first one is Chandragupta, his son Bindusara, and Bindusara's son Ashoka. So the first one is Chandragupta. The second ruler is Bindusara, and the third one is Ashoka. Okay. The places where inscriptions of Ashoka have been found are marked with red dots. Are marked with red dots. These were included within the empire. Name the countries where Ashokan inscriptions have been found. Which Indian states were outside the empire? Map 5. The Mauryan Empire, showing the principal cities and some of the places where inscriptions were found. There were several cities in the empire marked with black dots on the map. This included the capital, Patliputra, Taxila, and Ujjain. Taxila was a gateway to the northwest. So let's see, where is this? Taxila is here. Then we have Patliputra. It's here. Then we have got Ujjain. Ujjain is here. Ujjain is here. Okay. So Takshila was a gateway to the northwest, including Central Asia, while Ujjain lay on the route from north to South India. Merchants, officials, and craftspersons probably lived in these cities. In other areas, there were villages of farmers and herders. In some areas, such as central India, there were forests where people gathered forest produce and hunted animals for food. People in different parts of the empire spoke different languages. They probably ate different kinds of food and wore different kinds of clothes as well. How are empires different from kingdoms? Emperors need more resources than kings because empires are larger than kingdoms and need to be protected by big armies. So also they need a larger number of officials who collect taxes. Ruling the empire. As the empire was so large, different parts were ruled differently. The area around Patliputra was under the direct control of the emperor. This meant that officials were appointed to collect taxes from farmers, herders, craftspersons, and traders who lived in villages and towns in the area. Officials also punished those who disobeyed the ruler's order. Many of these officials were given salaries. Messengers went to and fro, and spies kept watch on the officials, and of course the emperor supervised them all with the help of members of the royal family and senior ministers. There were other areas or provinces. Each of these were ruled from a provincial capital such as Takshila or Ujjain. There were other areas or provinces. Each of these was ruled from a provincial capital such as Takshila or Ujjain. Although there were some amount of control from Patliputra and royal princes were often sent as governors. Local customs and rules were probably followed. Besides, there were vast areas between these centers. Here, the Mauryas tried to control roads and rivers, which were important for transport, and to collect whatever resources were available as tax and tribute. For example, the Arthasastra tells us that the northwest was important for blankets and the South India for its gold and precious stones. It is possible that these resources were collected as tribute. So, tribute. Unlike taxes, which were collected on a regular basis, tribute was collected as and when it was possible from people who gave a variety of things more or less willingly. There were also the forested reasons. People living in these areas were more or less independent but may have been expected to provide elephants, timber, honey, and wax to Mauryan officials. The emperor and the capital city. Megasthenes was an ambassador who was sent to the court of Chandragupta by a Greek ruler of West Asia named West Asia named Seleucus Nicator. Megasthenes wrote an account about what he saw. Here is a part of his description. The occasions on which the emperor appears in public are celebrated with grand royal processions. He is carried in a golden palanquin. His guards ride elephants decorated with gold and silver. Some of the guards carry trees on which live birds, including a flock of trained parrots, circle about the head of the emperor. The king is normally surrounded by armed women. He is afraid that someone may try to kill him. He has special servants to test the food before he eats. He never sleeps in the same bedroom for 2 nights. And about Patliputra, modern Patna, he wrote, "This is a large and beautiful city. It is surrounded by a massive wall. It has 570 towers and 64 gates. The houses of 2 and 3 stories are built of wood and mud brick. The king's palace is also of wood and decorated with stone carvings. It is surrounded with gardens and enclosures of keeping birds." Why do you think the king had special servants to test the food he ate? In what ways was Patliputra different from Mohenjo-daro? Ashoka, a unique ruler. The most famous Mauryan ruler was Ashoka. He was the first ruler who tried to take his message to the people through inscriptions. Most of Ashoka's inscriptions were in Prakrit and were written in the Brahmi script. Ashoka's War in Kalinga. Kalinga is the ancient name of coastal Orissa. See Map 5, page 76. Ashoka fought a war to conquer Kalinga. However, he was so horrified when he saw the violence and bloodshed that he decided to fight not to fight any more wars. He is the only king in the history of the world who gave up conquest after winning a war. Ashoka's inscriptions describing the Kalinga War. This is what Ashoka declared in one of his inscriptions. 8 years after becoming king, I conquered Kalinga. About 1.5 lakh people were captured, and more than 1 lakh of people were killed. This filled me with sorrow. Why? Whenever an independent land is conquered, lakhs of people die and many are taken prisoner. Brahmins and monks also die. People who are kind to their relatives and friends, to their slaves and servants die or lose their loved ones. That is why I am sad and have decided to observe Dhamma and to teach others about it as well. I believe that winning people over through Dhamma is much better than conquering them through force. I am inscribing this message for the future so that my son and grandson after me should not think about war. Instead, they should try to think about how to spread Dhamma. How did the Kalinga War bring about a change in Ashoka's attitude towards war? Dhamma, Dhamma in the Prakrit word for the is the Dhamma is the Prakrit word for the Sanskrit term dharma. So Dhamma, it means dharma. What was Ashoka's Dhamma? Ashoka's what was Ashoka's Dhamma? Ashoka's Dhamma did not involve worship of a god. It did not involve worship of a god or performance of a sacrifice. He felt that just as a father tries to teach his children, he had a duty to instruct his subjects. He was also inspired by the teachings of the Buddha. There were a number of problems that troubled him. People in the empire followed different religions, and these sometimes led to conflict. Animals were sacrificed. Slaves and servants were ill treated. Besides, there were quarrels in families and amongst neighbors. Ashoka felt it was his duty to solve these problems, so he appointed officials known as Dhamma Mahamata who went from place to place teaching people about Dhamma. Besides, Ashoka got his messages inscribed on rocks and pillars, instructing his officials to read his messages to those who could not read it themselves. Okay, this picture, is the Rampurva bull. Look at this finely polished stone sculpture. This was part of a Mauryan pillar found in Rampurva, Bihar, and has now been placed in Rashtrapati Bhavan. It is an example of the skill of the sculptors of the time. So Ashoka also sent messengers to spread ideas about Dhamma to other lands such as Syria, Egypt, Greece, and Sri Lanka. He built roads, dug wells, and built rest houses. Besides, he arranged for medical treatment for both human beings and animals. Ashoka's messages to his subjects. People perform a variety of rituals when they fall ill, when their children get married, when children are born, or when they go on a journey. These rituals are not useful. If instead people observe other practices, this would be more fruitful. What are these other practices? These are being gentle with slaves and servants, respecting one's elders, treating all creatures with compassion, giving gifts to Brahmins and monks. It is both wrong to praise one's own religion or criticize another's. Each one should respect the other's religion. If one praises one's own religion while criticizing another's, one is actually doing greater harm to one's own religion. Therefore, one should try to understand the main ideas of another's religion and respect it. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India, wrote, "His edicts, instructions still speak to us in a language we can understand, and we can still learn much from them." Identify the parts of Ashoka's message that you think are relevant today. So, these are the Brahmi script. So these are Brahmi script. This is early Brahmi, Devanagari, Hindi, Bengali, Malayalam, and this is Tamil. So most modern Indian scripts have developed from the Brahmi script over hundreds of years. Here you can see the letter A written in different scripts. So elsewhere, what's going on? Let's see. Somewhat before the time of the Mauryan Empire, about 2400 years ago, emperors in China began building the Great Wall. It was meant to protect the northern frontier of the empire from pastoral people. Additions of the wall were made over a period of 2000 years because the frontiers of the empire kept shifting. The wall is about 6,400 kilometer long and is made of stone and brick with a road along the top. Several thousand people worked to build the wall. There are watchtowers all along at distances of about 100 to 200 meters. In what ways do you think Ashoka's attitude towards neighboring peoples was different from that of the Chinese emperors? Imagine you live in Kalinga and your parents have suffered in the war. Messengers from Ashoka have just arrived with the new ideas about Dhamma. Describe the dialogue between them and your parents. So, complete the following sentences. Number A. Officials collected taxes from the area under the direct control of the ruler. Royal princes often went to the provinces as governors. The Mauryan rulers tried to control roads and rivers, which were important for transport. People in forested regions provided the Mauryan officials with elephants, timber, honey, and wax. Now let's see for True or false? Number A. Ujjain was the gateway to the northwest. It's false. Chandragupta's ideas were written down in the Arthasastra. It's false. It's Kautilya's. Kalinga was the ancient name of Bengal. It's false. It's Orissa. Most Ashokan inscriptions are in the Brahmi script. It's true. So, keywords: empire, capital, province, Dhamma, messenger, official. Some important dates: beginning of the Mauryan Empire more than 2300 years ago. So, this map shows important trade routes including the Silk Route. So, Chinese, Indian, Iranian, Arab, Greek, and Roman traders participated in these exchanges. The ports along the coast of South India were important centers for the export of pepper and other spices. Find Paduka, South India on the map. This was the Roman name for Paduka. So Paduka is here. Paduka, it's here. Then, looking ahead, the Mauryan Empire collapsed about 2200 years ago. In its place and elsewhere rose several new kingdoms. In the northwest and in parts of North India, kings known as Indo-Greeks ruled for about 100 years. They were followed by a Central Asian people known as Shakas, who set up kingdoms in the northwest, north and western India. Some of these kingdoms lasted for about 500 years till the Shakas were defeated by the Gupta kings. Chapter number 11. The Shakas in turn were followed by the Kushanas about 2000 years ago. You will learn more about the Kushanas in chapter 10. In the north and in parts of central India, a general of the Mauryas Pushyamitra named Pushyamitra Sung set up a kingdom. The Shungas were followed by another dynasty known as the Kanvas and by rulers from other families till the establishment of the Gupta Empire about 1700 years ago. The Shakas who ruled over parts of western India fought several battles with the Satavahanas, who ruled over western and parts of central India. The Satavahana kingdom, which was established about 2100 years ago, lasted for about 400 years. Around 1700 years ago, a new ruling family known as the Vagatakas became powerful in central and western India. In South India, the Cholas, Cheras, and Pandyas ruled between 2200 and 1800 years ago. And about 1500 years ago, there were two large kingdoms, those of the Pallavas and the Chalukyas. There were several other kingdoms and kings as well. We know about them from their coins and inscriptions as well as from books. There were other changes that were taking place, in which ordinary men and women played a major role. These include the spread of agriculture and the growth of new towns, crafts production, and trade. Traders explored land routes within the subcontinent and outside, and sea routes to West Asia, East Africa, and Southeast Asia were also opened up. And many new buildings were built, including the earliest temples and stupas. Books were written and scientific discoveries were made. These developments took place simultaneously, that is, at the same time. Keep this in mind as you read the rest of the book. So, this coin is the Indo-Greek coin, a Kushana coin, then a Shaka coin, then a Shatavahana coin. Okay, that's all guys. Thank you and see you in my next video. Bye guys.